For millennia, cities have been places where bright ideas spark. From the earliest riverside trading posts that turned into today's sprawling megacities in the digital global economy. Cities can create positive experiences for people, always connected by technology. And when connected places work well, it's good for people and the planet. But making a connected place succeed is hard. There's loads of stakeholders, businesses, regulators, and community groups who want to be involved across every mode of transport, every type of building, the infrastructure that underpins them, and the data and digital platforms that connect them. All of this is needed to help people, communities, neighbourhoods, and local businesses to prosper. Now, more than ever, we need our connected places to succeed. We are in a climate emergency. Rapid urbanisation means 3/4 of us will be living in a city by 2050. And new technologies are revolutionising the way that we live, the way we work, and the way we travel, creating fantastic opportunities for innovation, jobs, and growth. At Connected Places Catapult, we connect people, places, and businesses for a future of sustainable growth and prosperity. We are the UK's innovation accelerator for cities, transport, and place leadership. We are trusted across government, industry, and academia, connecting new technologies, business models, and investment opportunities. So join with us and be better connected for a future of sustainable growth and prosperity.
Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to this new Smarter Spending webinar, part of a new series that we are launching to empower more place leaders like yourselves to be confident, articulate customers of innovation. Some of you may have been to a previous iteration of this program. We ran a Smarter Spending series some years ago. And we've been busy since then developing new thought leadership, new guidance, new support, and new partnerships to empower more of you to be effective in the use of public procurement. So I'm really pleased to be launching this. I should introduce myself. My name is Sam Markey. I am the Ecosystem Director for Place Leadership here at Connected Places Catapult, and I'm the sponsor for this exciting program. And I'm really pleased to be welcoming all of you who I know represent local government, professional bodies, central government, and others who are interested in this space. We've got a great session today. We've got two expert friends joining us. Sarah Colkin is the editor of the Local Government Chronicle, who is going to be taking the chair from me in just a moment to guide the conversation. And we're also joined by Rakesh Shah, who is a leader in open innovation, in innovation procurement and organizational change to promote innovation. For a long time, he was at TfL. He's now at PA Consulting, and I'm delighted to be joined by both of them today. Do please ask questions as we go, but without further ado, I'll hand over to Sarah.
Thank you, Sam. It's great to be here, so thanks for the invite. I'm going to confess up front, I'm not a procurement expert, but I have been writing and reporting on local government for almost a decade now. So I know a little bit about that. And I have sensed in recent years that there's a lot more interest from councils in getting the most out of their procurement spend, whether that's through approaches like community wealth building and making sure the money that you spent stays locally, or increasingly demanding more and more social value from their suppliers. So perhaps innovation could be the sort of next frontier on that, but we can discuss that over the next 55 minutes. So Rakesh, can I come to you? What does innovation in public procurement mean to you, and why does the public sector need to innovate in this way?
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Sarah, for welcoming me to this, and also to Sam. It's really great to be here. So, firstly, I think innovation in the public sector for me is about creating new value. It's about doing things better, cheaper, and quicker. It's not about just creating lots of shiny products and you do the R&D and then you stop. And I think for me, it's got to be mission focused. And that mission focus could be on a particular knotty problem, or it could be on a strategic emerging theme. And we saw that some of those themes on the video up front. And also, I think sometimes we fall into the trap of doing everything ourselves as a public body. And for me, this is about co-creation. Is how can you bring the wider ecosystem in? And I'm sure we'll talk about that. And two other quick points is, in my view, innovation isn't just tech. It could be policy, it could be procurement, it could be process, it could be people. It's ultimately about creating that value. And I've read something Sam has shared with me in the past. You know, the UK PLC spends about, or the public sector spends about 300 billion a year. Well, we're shaping markets, we're creating new markets. So that's why I think, in my view, public sector innovation is critical.
And could you perhaps share with us an example of when you've used that approach in your time at TfL?
Yeah, I think, going into some specific, I could share some high level examples. One was around, just reeling some of these off, and I'll go into some more detail. One was around the role of data. We're exchanging value through data, through open data. We created lots of value at Transport for London. In fact, every million we spent, we got 130 million back. We've also created some innovation through R&D exemptions. So I was responsible for the procurement of the e-scooter trial in London. So we tried a brand new procurement route, which allowed us to accelerate and bring that into London with the right safe measures in place, but to do it quicker. We've also tried things where we've encouraged tier one suppliers to bring some R&D investment in to co-develop solutions with TfL in London. So people like Bosch, or organizations like Bosch and Daimler, invested millions of pounds. But the one specific one, and maybe you might ask me about this later on, is how we use the innovative partnerships procedure, where we created a problem statement, very focused. And as a result, we applied a procurement procedure called the Innovative Procurement Partnership, which was an EU procurement at the time, which allowed us to do the R&D and scaling at the same time. But I'm sure we'll talk about that in more detail.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I mean, I guess we'd love to hear about that. And Sam, just to come to you, I mean, how is innovation-led procurement different to a regular procurement?
As Rico said, huge amounts of money spent by the UK public sector, 300 billion nationally, almost 70 billion by local government alone. So huge spending. Huge amount of that just goes out in very standard tenders, often very large tenders, where a small number of organisations actually have the capacity to bid and deliver. And as a result, we don't see the diversity and the creativity that we want to see. Connected Business Catapult's job is to stimulate the adoption and the scaling of innovative products and services across the place sector, transport, built environment, local services. And so we want to open up more of those great commercial contracts, great commercial opportunities to more providers. And indeed, what we have now isn't even working for the incumbents. The data from a couple of years ago suggested that around 23% of public tenders only receive one bid, which doesn't suggest we're getting good value for money as a taxpayer and good choice as service managers. And a CBI report from a similar point a couple of years ago said that 95% of businesses didn't feel like public contracts incentivized them to innovate in any way. So again, huge commercial opportunity. We've seen amazing pioneering practice in pockets, and Rakesh we'll talk about more, and I can give a few examples as well, but we're just not seeing enough of it. And it comes down to using that spending power in a more confident, creative way, and really harnessing the power of brilliant British businesses.
So yeah, you talked about the need to be sort of more confident. I mean, what do you think are the kind of barriers to local government using this approach? Rakesh, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, and can I just build on Sam's point as well before I come on to that? It's there is a question of why is it important to innovate, and I think citizens who we represent expect more. I think going back to Sam's point, UK PLC, is we're the engine room of creating innovative products. We have a fantastic history of it. And how do we keep that going? And how does UK PLC become the center of R&D and innovation across the world? So I think we have a fantastic test bed. I think the budgets, despite us spending £300 billion, are tight. And we want more. So as a result, how do we get more with the spend that we have? And I think that's where innovation comes in. Um, the barriers to entry have reduced. So the types of ecosystems that you could create, from startups to scale ups to the large corporates and academia, is significant now. And the final point is the diversity of thought. If we start bringing different types of innovators in, we'll get different thinking, and as a result, we will sort of represent the city that or the country that we're trying to serve. So I think the why is important. In terms of some of your barriers, point, I think the first thing is culture. Culture comes up again and again. I had this challenge at TfL. One is the risk averseness. We worry about what the newspaper might say. We worry about what the politicians might say. We worry about lots of things. But actually, you can put the right safeguards in place to manage that risk. I think the fear of failure and it's the way we're rewarded and incentivized as individuals. The fear of failure is a big challenge. I think change is hard generally in the public sector, and to do it at scale. And sometimes organizations often quite work in silos. So again, when you're trying to bring something new in, it might require a cross-organization view. But and the hypothesis I used to run at TfL is sometimes we want to do everything ourselves. So the tech or the engineering people will say, yeah, that's a new problem. We can do it. We can solve it because we're problem solvers. And if we can't do it, we'll go out to the market with an overprescribed solution. So the market will come back and say, we could do it differently, but if we want to win your tender, actually, we better meet your brief, which is a very prescribed brief. So I think that's a challenge. And a couple of other areas would be, we're not always the intelligent client, so we do for the hype, sometimes from tier one suppliers. Then the big thing at the moment is Gen AI. So someone will be asking the business, say, where's our Gen AI strategy, and why aren't we buying lots of things around Gen AI? But do we really understand what it means? So I think there's got to be a long-term view, and you've also got to understand how in the short term do you get to that long-term goal. So I think there's lots of barriers, but it can be resolved.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your comment around Gen AI and some of the sort of the chat and confusion around it at the moment. But is that one example of where you could use this innovation approach to sort of say, we're interested in an AI solution to this problem, show us what you can do? Is that the kind of thing that we're talking about here?
Yeah, and Sam might have a view on this as well. I mean, my view would be, when I was leading innovation there, people talk about robotics, they talk about AI, they'll talk about quantum, and they'll talk about the next big thing on the hype curve. And quite often I would say, I'm not interested in the technology that's used. What I'm interested in is, have we defined the right problem? And then are there solutions out there that could solve the problem? And if Gen AI is the answer, if robotics is the answer, that's great. Let's then test it. But my starting position was always, have we gone out there with a very clearly articulated problem with the right context? And then let's go to the market to come up with the solutions and the technologies, or not, that can solve our challenges.
Yeah, I echo that absolutely. I mean, there are some incredibly bright and brilliant people in local government, and I used to be one of them. Bright and brilliant, I don't know, but certainly I used to be in local government, so I have the experience of working there and trying to do everything and wanting to be across everything. And too often we see that, as Rakesh says, when there is appetite and momentum to do something new, tend to rush to the answer rather than rush towards the best possible question. The great example here that's often used is the company that was, or perhaps in the case of a procurement, that was trying to buy the perfect drill bit, investing in all sorts of new materials. And of course, what the customer wanted was a hole. They didn't really care how you drilled it. And maybe a laser or maybe highly trained moles would be a better solution. But if you write in, I want this type of drill bit, or indeed this type of service or this type of tarmac or whatever, then you engineer out the possibility for a company to come along and say, I've got actually an AI solution, or I've got a different solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Rakesh, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, and there was thank you, Sarah. There was an example, and I won't say where and who, but we were sat in a room and we had a problem, and we spent about a minute on the problem, and this was very senior folk, and we spent the next hour on each other's solutions. and we're critiquing each other's solutions. But the point there being is, if we would have framed the question in the right way, with that right context, and then gone out to the market, we'd have lots of different ideas to explore. And that's what we need to be better at, is define the problem and let the brilliant innovators out there come up with the solutions, and then we start the critique. Whereas sometimes we just like to do it within our closed circle. And then if you go 5 degrees that way, because someone senior has said, let's go in that direction, someone then looks back in 3 years and says, we've got it completely wrong. Why did we go in that route? So I think we've got to get the foundations right up front, which is, asking the right questions.
And how do you know then if, are there certain types of products or services that are more suitable to take this approach with, or could it apply to anything?
Let me jump in quick on that one. So I think that there is a tendency, as I said in my earlier comment, in the public sector, partly because procurement is, seen to be risky, seen to be challenging, and rightly so. It's public money. You need to make sure you're, showing good diligence and good financial management. We tend to lump contracts into very, very large, full-scale, full deployment, multi-million-pound programs, which of course is not where you want to be doing in most instances, something that is untested or with a company which you don't know can deploy at scale. There are a variety of tools and approaches that you can use, from looking ahead 5-10 years and doing innovation grants, things which are investing in feasibility studies, working with academics, working with small companies. There are nearer to market tools like the SBRI program, the pre-commercial procurement tool, which Ian and his colleagues, who I know are on the call, champion at Innovate UK, where you're looking at near-term things. It's not going to be fully deployable, but you're creating a real product. And one of the great examples here is an underfloor insulation robot that crawls underneath the floorboards of buildings and sprays insulation rather than to lift all the floorboards and do it in an expensive and destructive way. That was produced through one of these SBRI programs. Then you've got things like Rakesh mentioned, the public procurement of innovation, where you're looking at something which is imminent. It's not on the shelf, but you're looking for a serious deployment at scale, and you want to prove it. Maybe it exists in a different setting, in a different application, a different industry. And you're saying, well, or they're saying, actually, no, it could work here for your solution as well, and you want to prove it. And then, of course, there are brilliant things on frameworks and out there in the general market. So there's something here about part of the kind of empowerment and the upskilling that we want to support is helping people understand the right tool for the task. And indeed, local authorities ideally should be thinking across each of those horizons, and service managers be thinking about, what might need to happen in 5 years' time, what needs to happen in 3 years' time, what might I buy next year, and how am I making sure all of that brilliant new ways of working are being drawn into my service supply base.
Yeah, sure. Rakesh, what would you say based on your experience?
Yeah, and I think what Sam and the catapults are doing is really impressive here. If we think about what Sam's just described, at one end in the near term, you can copy ideas from other industries. Yeah, very easy, because things could be working outside of transport that could be applied in transport. So how do we bring them in? And that could be the products there, but you need to sort of configure it so it works in the context in the local public service. That could be a straightforward procurement activity. But then if we go to the extreme at the other end, say in 15, 20 years, someone needs to start doing that horizon scanning, because we're buying assets now that will be around in 15, 20 years, whether it's buildings, whether it's street lamps and other things. So how do we create a sensor where you're horizon scanning of the lamppost today is there to provide some lighting, but in the future it might be talking to a connected vehicle, or it might be doing something else. How do you start future-proofing some of the things that you're buying? And then there's the bits in the middle. And I think you've got to have the right strategy, the right processes, working with the likes of the catapult to make sure that you're bringing as much intelligence as possible, and then you're deploying the right procurement procedure, whether it's to test something at a technical level, or whether it's to scale it, or whether it's something else where you use the right routes to market.
Sure. We've got some comments coming on the chat, and I encourage anyone else to get your questions in there, and we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. Ian Brotherson saying he's interested to hear more about two issues that he faces when working with government. So a positive one, being prepared for success. So if something works and need implementing, then how do you move that into a large scale change program? And Rakesh, I wonder, is that something you've had experience of?
Yes. Sorry, could you
Yeah.
repeat that? We heard about the scaling part. Sorry, Sarah, would you mind repeating it?
Yeah, so I think Ian's just asking, well, how do you deal with the issue of if you have an innovation that's successful and then you want to roll it out on a much larger scale, how do you approach that?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple of examples. So I think the first one is the buses contracting that we had in London was quite significant in size. And as a result, we used to go out with the specification of standard as to what a type of bus should contain when you bid for a contract. And then within that, what we used to do is run some innovation challenges, and then we'd vary the contract. So we did one for bus safety, where we allocated some money, we allocated a bus operator to work with a partner and to test the solution. And the solutions were wide ranging from, well, it doesn't matter what they were, but there were wide ranging solutions from things that you could do in the garage or things that you put on the bus. And then what we found is that some of those solutions were working, we will then change the specification or the standard for future procurements. So then that innovation is embedded in any future procurements that you have for bus contracting. So that was one example of how we scaled it after some testing. And the second area was the IPP. So with the innovative partnership procedure, we went out with a problem statement, which was help us reduce the adverse impact of roadworks in London. So that's challenges around congestion, road safety, air quality. And when we went out to market, we got lots of different ideas and we tested 9 of them. And we tested them over a 10-week period. But it wasn't like the traditional procurement where you're procuring pretty much the same stuff. Here we had some things that were VR tools, software modeling tools, physical barriers. So you're not comparing like for like, which for a procurement person, is probably quite stressful. And I remember my procurement colleagues saying to me, we're not comparing like for like here, this is difficult. But what we did is at the end of the R&D section, that section that we had through the IPP, we were able to down select 2 solutions. And the 2 solutions, one was around using AI and essentially looking for keywords based on what people are doing on social media. So if someone reports a water leak or there's a gas leak reported or traffic signal's not working, that event type would be searched for and it will go into our control center to say, on the A406, the signal seems to be down, can we get someone out there? So we're using that event type methodology, which is essentially an algorithm, AI. And the other one we brought in was we were modeling the impact of roadworks before we carried them out. So again, it was a big data product. But lots of other ideas, but both of them have been scaled. Both of them are in a control center in London, and we also co-developed them. So there's lots of iteration. We got things wrong at the beginning and we took it forward. And it was based on the learnings of the initial R&D trial, because more often than not, what happened in the past is we do the R&D and then we'd have to go back to the market. And the one that did the R&D with us would say, well, I've just spent a whole load of time and effort to create a product with you. And now you're going to share all my learnings with the market and I'm at a disadvantage. So that's where 2 examples there where we've been able to do the R&D and scaling and add value in the long run.
I can jump in on that. I think one of the things you said to me before, Rakesh, that is really striking, and I think speaks to Ian's point around implementing innovation, is the way that when you were at TfL, I know you were very clear on having a challenge owner. That this isn't an R&D team doing some fun stuff. Wouldn't it be fun if we could do the following? It's, I am a service manager. I am trying to deliver the following improvement or change or outcome, and I have a real budget and I have a real delivery team, infrastructure, and you were working with them, and therefore you've got a natural implementation advocate and system. I still think Ian's right. There is often a wider organizational, or can be wider organizational implications to new ways of working. If we start using self-healing concrete, then what does that mean? Concrete's a bad example, isn't it? Self-healing road material. Let's make it more generic. Then what does that mean for highway? All sorts of other highway contracts, other sorts of maintenance, which has cascade implications. And I think one of the reasons we've launched this program is explicitly to do that, to think about not just how you use procurement for the specific procurement bit, but how you capture scale and diffuse that value and bring whole organizations along, which this has to be about whole organizational transformation.
Rakesh,
could I build on that if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, thank you. And answering Ian's question directly, we'd have lots of problem statements that would come into the innovation team. But what we had was, if we took anything forward, the question I would ask the team is, have we got the right conditions for scale? So we would already be thinking about the scaling when we've got the problem statement in. And if that meant 6 months to go back and forth to address that, that was fine. Because the worst thing I wanted to do is spend 2 years on a program or 6 months on a program and then find out we can't scale it. So some of those conditions were, we have full commitment from the business area to help us scale it if it's a good idea, well, to support the R&D, but then to scale it if it's a good idea. I would work with my business planning colleague, who is my peer, to say, if this idea works, can you please reallocate that budget that you've allocated for that business area in 2 years' time to scale it? So suddenly we were thinking about scaling right from day one. So the hypothesis was this will work. How do we make sure we do the right planning and have HR or engineering or the tech people, anyone that would have a view at the table on day one? And then if we can't agree, well, then I'll say, let's push this to the backlog and let's focus on something else, because ultimately we want to create value. So Sam, fully agree with you. Procurement is one element, but there are so many other elements for the innovation to work.
Yeah, so you both talk there about in needing sort of organisational buy-in and sort of the role of the service heads being really important. Do you think there is that kind of sort of focus at the moment amongst service heads? I mean, even sort of in general procurement, we often hear that that's not something that they see as part of their role. So, I mean, is there a skills issue, I suppose, in achieving this?
Go on, Sam.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I think there is. I spoke at the it wasn't local government, it was a built environment education event earlier in the year, and I asked exactly that question. I asked the question, do you see procurement as being an amazing ally in delivering your service projects objectives, or frankly a bit of a headache, or are you just here because your bus is in half an hour? And the majority of people view was that procurement's a problem, it's broken, it's all about compliance, it's computer says no, and it is not part of the innovation toolkit. And Rakesh and I and others fundamentally believe that's a fundamental misunderstanding, and so we are certainly here to encourage procurement professionals. But I'm more interested. I'm not a procurement professional either. I haven't come to this from a procurement background. I'm more interested in engaging service managers and those who are delivering local services and putting into place the ambitious plans and strategies for the citizens that local authorities have and other public sector partners, and helping them to see how to work with their procurement teams and how to work with their organization, how to work with the market to deliver those outcomes. So yeah, there is definitely an education and an empowerment needed to affect a change here. And we're seeing it in a national policy language. The innovation strategy identifies procurement as a powerful tool for stimulating new solutions in public services. The Science and Technology Framework from DCIT called it out again at the start of this year, one of the 10 commitments government made to stimulating innovation, the innovation nation. And I've been very active in challenging local authorities to steal a march on central government in kind of committing and acting on the idea of channeling a portion, say 5% of that £70 billion a year they spend on goods and services with the market through one of these innovation-friendly mechanisms, and demonstrating the power which is already appearing in pockets and sort of pioneering examples. So yeah, there is a rising interest in policy space around public procurement, and I suppose we're here because we want to get on that wave and get more people excited about it. I'm not going to push that metaphor, and I was about to do a weird surfing metaphor, but I thought procurement and surfing would be a strange mix.
Yeah, Thank you. And Rakesh, I wonder for you, so obviously TfL is a very large organisation. Do you think this approach can work in individual local authorities, or is some kind of scale required, say, across a combined authority area or something like that? What's your take on that?
My view is absolutely it can work. TfL, we had fantastic procurement colleagues, but in my view, it depended on what procurement colleague I was working with, whether the innovation could work or not. So it felt like potluck at times. And procurement is an incredibly responsible role. You want to make sure that you're using taxpayers' money wisely, you're doing it openly, you don't want to get legal challenge and all those other good things. But you can still apply those principles when you're delivering innovation. And I think actually a local authority, it's the same principles, arguably. It doesn't matter what the spend level is, whether it's £5 or £100 or, well, there are thresholds, of course, but whether you're spending £1 million or £10 million, the process should be the same. And I think, we try to sort of work in partnership between innovation and procurement. And my advice would be the CPO should be working closely with the head of innovation to say, what does your pipeline look like over the next 5 years? And where can innovation help? Because as a CPO, the Chief Procurement Officer, I'm accountable to make sure I'm creating value. So I think value isn't about how many challenges you get or how many times you've reduced 5 or 10% of cost. It's also some of it's transformational. And that means that, going back to my earlier point, if your category managers are really intelligent about the categories that's operating in, that does mean what does that category look like in 5, 10, 15 years? And how do I create the evidence base to say this is the right thing we should be procuring? So how do you get ahead of the procurement pipeline? And so answering your question, yes, it definitely can be done. I think there is a mindset shift required, some of its capability, but it's about what's the role. There is a fundamental question. What's the role of the commercial manager in an organization? And I think every organization should be asking that. And how do you get best value from them?
Sure. Interesting question just come in on the chat. Obviously, we've got the procurement bill going through Parliament at the moment, soon to become law. And the question is, do you think the new procurement rules, which I assume that's what the question is referring to, will allow more opportunities for innovation? Will it make this approach easier or more difficult? And Sam, if I come to you first on that.
Yeah, sure. So we've been working very closely with the Bill team at Cabinet Office and very pleased with the engagement that we've had and the enthusiasm they've had for the innovation potential. There is nothing which you can do now which you will not be able to do in the future. So in that sense, no need to wait for the new regulations. The new legislation opens the playing field still further. And I think, as we said, the fact that the mechanisms exist already but aren't being used widely demonstrates that something does need to shift, at least in the understanding of what's possible. So we welcome the new legislation. We are going to be publishing some guidance later in the year around the flexible open procedure to hopefully support procurement teams and their service partners in laying hold of it. And we welcome the innovation language. I think there was hopefully at some point we will see the innovation vision document, or innovation ambition, which was co-produced with Cabinet Office, and I think has got held up in all sorts of other things, as policy papers often do. But broadly speaking, yes, no bad thing, and working closely with those teams to promote the new approaches and new possibilities.
Cool. Rakesh, what's your take on the new procurement bill?
Yeah, I was reading recently a letter that Sir Patrick Vallance and Lord Brown put together, which I shared with the Cabinet Office, and it was on the procurement bill. And some of it was around, value is more than the lowest cost. And sometimes we do get caught up in that lowest cost. So how do you look at the total value? And some of it could be qualitative, some of it's quantitative when you're designing procurements. But also, how can we get on the front foot? How can we be more proactive around what things we want to procure? And that's at all levels. And also, how do you give the right signals to the market? How do you stimulate the market of where they should be investing their R&D budgets and innovation budgets? How do you do that early rather than doing it reactively? And I think within the existing procurement legislation, you can innovate. And I think yeah, I had examples of that at Transport for London. So for me, it's about addressing, being clear on that and creating that playbook, but also providing the right leadership and creating the right capability. And I think if we get that with the right culture, I expect to see public bodies, whether local government or central government, trying new things, and as a result, creating new value in the long run. Some things will fail, right? That's the point of innovation. You don't know what's going to be produced. So you also go in there with the right controls and safeguards in place, but expect to see things failing. I used to challenge my team. They'll produce their map of all the things that are going on, and there'll be lots of greens. And I was saying, there's too many greens here. We're playing it too safely. We need to push a bit harder because I want to see more reds. And that's the environment we need to create, is actually reward people for trying new things. If they fail from it, you learn and you move fast, but you deploy it in the next one. So how do you create that entrepreneurial mindset shift? And that's what I'm hoping the procurement bill can sort of encourage CPOs, but also wider leaders to be thinking about it that way too.
Sure. Do you have any examples, Rakesh, you could share of where you have tried something and it didn't work out as planned, and how you managed that? Or
yeah, let me come back to that one. So I'll pick the right example. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I will answer it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I guess you talked about that sort of mindset shift, and I guess there is public sector, local government often is quite risk averse. And is there a danger it's about to become even more so when we've had some really high profile council failures in recent months? Is there a danger that puts people off from trying this different approach? Sam, I wonder what you think about that.
Yes, clearly, fail fast, fail forwards is a great attitude to have, but it's difficult, in lots of contexts to actually deploy that. So I think two things. One, there's a tendency to pick the wrong tool, to try and do something innovative at the wrong scale at the wrong time in the development process. And so clearly, the entire underground network, or indeed schools or other buildings going out to commission because you deployed something that wasn't tested at scale without going through the appropriate process, clearly that is not a good thing to advocate. Picking a particular street or a particular station or a particular part of a service and testing something and seeing if it works before you go full scale, I think is a good approach. And indeed, Liverpool City Council, who won the Future Places Award at the LGC Awards that we sponsor this year, did exactly that. They worked with a particular set of streets, particular part of Liverpool that had a particular need around waste collection, and they worked with the market to develop, test, and deploy a solution. And no doubt that solution has been scaled more widely, and more cities around the UK will copy it because it worked in some specific alleys in Liverpool, and now it's been proven you can take it to full deployment. And the other point around this and the sort of the challenging financial position that councils face is that there just isn't money for the kind of open-ended, disconnected innovation projects that used to happen 10, 15, 20 years ago. But we still need to drive better outcomes, more efficient services, new ways of working. And the way to do that, I think, without creating more money, is to use the money you're already spending smarter, to break out small parts of that around discrete problems, discrete service needs, discrete locations, and say, let's try something different with the money we're already spending. And if it works, well, then that's hopefully that scales and drives new efficiencies and new outcomes across the whole council, across the whole service operation. If it doesn't, well, it's a test, it's a pilot. You've learned something, and you won't do it that way again.
Yeah, thank you. Rakesh, there's a question come in for you specifically. Can you describe how the procurement process for the e-scooters in London, which he suggests was done quickly, included meaningful local community engagement?
Yeah, and I think so. We used the R&D exemption when it first happened, and the meaningful community engagement is critical in my view, which is if you're bringing something innovative in, that there's an unknown, and that unknown means that actually perversely you've got to spend more time to make sure that you're engaging with the local community and others. So as part of that process, we've created at TFL a design thinking team. And I've never heard of a design thinking team in the public sector. And their job is exactly that, is to start designing the problem by working with key stakeholders. So that stakeholders could be bus drivers, it could be local communities, it could be internal colleagues, anyone that has an interest in that particular problem. And what we did at Transport for London is, like most public bodies, you have to do an EQIA. And the EQIA is an equality impact assessment. It isn't just to tick a box. It's really to go out there and say, if we bring this in, what impact is it having, not just on users, but non-users? And I think this is critical, that you've got to be open and transparent when you're bringing something new in, even if it's in a testbed environment, because people will be asking questions about, where will this operate? Will it go on the pavement? Will it go on the road? What data are you collecting? What other insights will you have? What does it mean for me? And frankly, that's where you should be spending more of your time, is to make sure that the solutions you're designing, so when they go live, they're safe, they're secure, they're reliable, and they do what you expected them to do, or at least if they didn't do what you expected to do, you put the right safeguards in place. So, yep, the answer is absolutely. The community engagement was a core part of any procurement that we ran.
Thank you. And yeah, there's a point earlier we didn't get to around the incentives for doing this, and the sort of, I suppose, the Treasury's, how comfortable the Treasury might be with these kind of approaches. Sam, what's your take on that? Do the incentives need to be better?
Yes, I think if we want to see the kind of nationwide cultural change, if we want to use this spending power and the creativity of the public sector, the local public sector, and the market working together to stimulate the innovation nation, or the kind of science innovation superpower, whatever the hot policy jargon of the day is, then yes, we absolutely have to think about this. Not that the incentives and the policy guidance, spending guidance for those, again, very extreme, very large, very complex projects needs to change, but there needs to be a recognition that smaller, lighter, more agile projects should be given a slightly different approach. I remember working with the National Centre for Cybersecurity some years ago, when a lot of these kind of connected technologies were starting to move out of the lab and into the real world. And they were very forward thinking and recognizing that you couldn't have the most extreme sort of security requirements that you would have for critical national infrastructure for a street lamp. If you want to create new products and services in the public realm, then you have to set more, be more pragmatic about what's required, and have a kind of risk appetite which is more appropriate. And I think the same is true with those spending, with those incentives. I really commend the government for adopting the commitment to a unspecified proportion of public spending. Hopefully we'll see some specifications. I know 5% was mooted in the initial proposal, and for that money to be channeled through innovation mechanisms. That's the equivalent. If government departments put 5% of public spending, or public spend with the private sector through that kind of mechanism, it would be equivalent to 20 of the new advanced research and invention agencies. So our big sort of moonshot program, we'd have 20 of those, at the drop of a hat. Local government, with its £70 billion, doesn't tot up to quite as many, but it's still 3 or 4. It's a significant impact, and I would really like to see the Treasury coming in behind DCIT and the Cabinet Office and BEIS, as was, in endorsing public spending and the power of the public purse to stimulate innovation around real challenges, in their guidance and in their rules.
Yeah. Thank you. Interesting. And so we're coming into the final 15 minutes. So anybody sitting on burning questions, I'd encourage you to get them in the chat now. Well, I touched on it in my opening remarks, the sort of increasing focus on social value in local government and procurement. Is innovation, could it be argued that is a form of social value, or is it something different? So I think we are seeing some councils say, you know, X proportion of a contract needs to be, you know, delivering social value and things like that. How does it all sort of knit together? And Sam, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, and then Rakesh may have views. I mean, social value actually incredibly important, and the contribution it makes to, in a time of tight public spending, to create social outcomes and support you know, new life chances, all those sorts of things is really good. I slightly worry though that social value in procurement has got away from where it's kind of intended to be. It can quite easily, a bit like Section 106 payments in or affordable housing requirements in planning, can almost be bought off, you know, if not treated seriously, or if not kind of taken seriously. Whereas my view is that an innovation-friendly approach to procurement, which opens up more public contracts to innovative companies, often small companies, often local companies, has greater potential to transform the economic opportunities and the inclusion of people across the UK than necessarily funding, you know, a set number of apprentices or putting money into social centres or social programmes. So they are complementary. They don't compete. But I think the transformative power of an innovation approach in procurement to stimulate what might be considered true social value and you know, open up new jobs and new opportunity across the country is really significant, and one that we should again look at very seriously as local leaders and as local government, because I think it does play into those secondary benefits. A research that we've done, which we're hoping to test slightly further in the coming years through this programme, suggests that an innovation-based exercise is more effective at stimulating the growth of an SME than a grant. And businesses that receive public sector contracts, even small ones, are much more investable, much more likely to secure additional funding from the private sector, because they've got that really solid, proven customer, and the product they've got, you know, in theory, you can deploy to every council in the country. So you've got an obvious scaling pathway. So there's a very powerful sort of economic opportunity for business for transforming local jobs and local employment as well as outcomes.
Sure, thank you. Rakesh.
Yeah, and also building on the last question, the previous question as well, you know, the question around can innovation be done at low cost? Well, the answer is absolutely. And, you know, thinking about the open data example, we just released a few data sets, and very quickly we had 700 apps powered by TfL data. So that's 700 new businesses. So you don't always have to transact on cash. There are other assets that you have that you can transact on. And then in terms of the social value point, I think, you know, I can comment on from a transport perspective. You know, transport is much more than moving people from A to B. You know, there's a health agenda around people being more active. There's a social agenda in terms of economic growth, because where you have a transport hub, you might also create economic prosperity. And there's also an agenda around productivity. And if you start putting all of that together when you're procuring things, that has a contribution to all of those elements. And what I would like to see a little bit more of is, if 300+ billion is being spent, why can't we have so if it's 5%, that's a significant amount of money going to R&D and procurement and innovation. And from that, if you are spending that much, let's set the challenge on local authorities to say, if you were to spend that on innovation, what's the return on investment? What's the total return on investment in terms of social value? And I think we can do that, and we can account for it. And as a result, the local authorities, I think, will become more entrepreneurial, because if you set a target of saying every pound I spend, I might give you £5 back, it doesn't mean every project has to be successful, but there'll be a few that will create incredible value. And I think that's the mindset that we need to encourage, but measure social value in its broadest sense.
Thank you, Rakesh. And are there any other examples we haven't touched upon that you wanted to share with us today from your experience. I know people are always really interested to hear those sort of real world experiences.
So at a high level, if I was to say what the ingredients are for innovation to work in a public sector body, I think we've touched on the cultural piece around leadership and rewarding and incentivizing the right way. But I think there's 3 or 4 other areas that you could look at, maybe 5 or 6. The first one is having people that are facing off to the business areas who you work with hand in partnership. So don't make sure the innovation function isn't set outside the business. So have people that really understand the context of the problem. I think I've touched on horizon scanning, which is go out there and work with the startups, the SMEs, the corporates to understand where their technology is and how can you steer it in the right direction. At TfL, we're quite fortunate in the mobility space, we could do that. You've got to excite the market. So that means don't be scared to talk to the market. You know, sometimes procurement colleagues might say you can't talk to the market even before a procurement's opened. Well, go out there and talk to the market, see what's out there. I think experiment, create your test beds, and put the right safeguards in place. And when you're experimenting, make sure you're absolutely clear on what you're testing. Is it the technology? Is it the commercial model? Is it the operating model? What is it? Develop your business case. Some things won't work, some things will. If they do work, make sure you put the right procurement processes in place right at the beginning. Don't go out 5 or 6 times because it will just annoy the market. And then going back to the scaling point, make sure you've got your change agents in your team that can work with the business area. There's no point saying, here's a fantastic idea, now good luck with it. I think you've got to help them on that journey and say, how do we scale it in the right way? And as I say, failure's fine. Have that balanced portfolio. Try some things that are a bit radical, but don't invest too much money in it. It's a long bet, but also have some safe bets and help the organization become that center of excellence in your organization rather than allowing the organization to do business as usual and innovation at the same time. Because the focus will always be, I've got to run my day-to-day business. Why do I do this? So create the right capability in your business to help others out.
Thank you, Kesh. That's really helpful. Sam, did you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just to say that it is possible to affect change, to adopt this. You know, TfL wasn't always a leader, and Rakesh built a team there and made the case, and it took time, but has affected change. We've worked with Belfast and others who have all discovered the power of this approach and have gone on to do great things in their own right. And you know, a big part of why we have created this program is to support more places to discover the opportunity in their hands and to lay hold of it. And hopefully we'll feature more of you on events in the future, and more of you will bid for the Future Places Award. Entries open any day now, I think, Sarah, is that right?
Yeah.
Next year's award. We want to celebrate pioneering practice in public procurement, innovation-friendly procurement in the public sector. So yeah, it's a exciting time.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, I mean, I found that a really interesting discussion. I think it came across really strongly that this isn't a sort of add-on. It should be mainstream in how, you know, all teams in councils are always thinking about how they can improve services and do things better and differently. So this should be another kind of tool in that box. And I think the other thing that came across really strongly, though, I think was, you know, just that figure alone, 70 billion spent by local government, that gives the sector some real power in the market, and perhaps, you know, that should embolden people to ask for more and to see what happens. And approaching it more as a partnership between the public and private sector rather than a sort of very sort of standoffish kind of client relationship, which probably isn't going to get you the best outcome. So yeah, so some really interesting points there, and a great discussion. Sam, thank you for already plugging Future Places Awards. If you keep an eye on lgcplus.com, the awards are launching any day now for 2024, so do check that out. And yeah, thank you again for inviting me to chair. So a great discussion. Sam, I think you wanted to do a bit of an update about what you have planned next.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Sarah and Rakesh, for hosting and sharing your expertise in the few final seconds. Hopefully, those of you out there listening have found this as exciting and engaging as we have. This is the first of an ongoing series of webinars and events. Some of them will be discussions like this. Some of them will be more workshopy. A couple of the questions that came up actually in the chat. So next week, you have to don't forget next month. There's one next week, which is on how do you engage across the organisation around this topic. So, you know, if you've been inspired today, but you need to bring your procurement person along, or your legal person, or your risk person, or a service manager, or whoever it is, there's a session next week, which we will repeat again in the future. But if you get there next week, then do, which is exactly that. How do you kind of make friends and influence people and build that kind of alliance that Rakesh is talking about within the organisation? Next month, we're going to be looking at how you define challenges and how you, ask the right sort of questions. Again, someone put that in the chat as a topic of interest. That's just a critical tool. Over the coming months, we are going to be looking for local authorities who have shared innovation needs or innovation needs around similar service areas, and trying to build communities of practice or conversations amongst you. From next financial year, we will be resuming our funded kind of practical program to support selected number of authorities in that. So do get involved in those conversations. We try and aggregate and work out where there might be common innovation needs that we can work with you on at our cost and, you know, with your time. So that's the webinar program. Sign up for what's coming down the track. Tell us what you want, and we will evolve the program as we go. We both mentioned it at the LGC award, so do bid for that and tell your friends about it. Continue the conversation at the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre LinkedIn group, which will come a link to you or in the post-event email. And this is all part of our wider work to upskill place leaders, not just to be confident customers innovation, but also to be effective stewards of the innovation economy. And some of you may have seen that we've been publishing this week, and we published just yesterday a second part of a report, a roadmap towards innovation-led prosperity. And we've included within that specific recommendation around innovation procurement and this idea of local authorities committing 5% of their spend through an innovation procurement exercise. There's more information there about investment and leadership and the innovation economy and how we can transform the destiny of more parts of the UK. So if you're interested in that, or if you have economic development colleagues or LEP colleagues or like, then do send them that. We will, again, circulate the link. So thank you all for your questions. Do join us next week or next month or on LinkedIn. And in your own ways, please join me in thanking once again Sarah and Rakesh for this, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.